Hello, and welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and CEO of E equals Y. Each week, we explore the fascinating world of leadership, and we feature voices across different generations, industries, styles, and experiences. Because there's really no right way to show up as a leader. It's about being authentic and bringing your full self to the table. Each week, we'll meet a different leader and we'll learn what really drives them. What's their unique leadership style? How have they adapted over time? And some of their tips and tricks for you. So, before we get started, we love to make this session very interactive. So, please feel free in the chat to introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from, and let us know what your favorite season is. So, Neil, I'll ask you that too. So, you be ready for that question when we get started. Let's get started. So, I am so thrilled to welcome Neil Goodrich as our next guest on Voices of Leadership. Neil is the Chief Innovation Officer at Invista Forensics. He is a leader with dynamic and diverse background that spans across accounting, fiction writing, investigation, operations, technology, and innovation. There's a lot there. So I think we'll unpack all of that. Prior to joining Invista, Neil spent 15 years in technology leadership, most recently as the Chief Innovation Officer at M. Holland Company, and he was responsible for all IT functions as well as leading digital change within the organization. Neil has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Illinois of Chicago and an MBA in their School of Business. Neil's passion for growth and evolution has driven him to pioneer transformative digital products, lead company-first initiatives, and build award-winning technology teams known for their creativity. His approach to leadership centers around progress, creativity, and embracing change, making him a true catalyst for innovation wherever he goes. So, Neil, welcome. So excited to have you here. And I really want to start by congratulating you because I understand you've recently been named 2024 Chicago CIO of the Year. All right.
I did. It's interesting if you pull back. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I think my favorite season is on full display. I think that's a clear. There's a lot of autumn, Halloween. I'm very pro Halloween. The award is cool because if you look at the amount of information and what we had to provide to participate in the process, there was a lot. It was all, in fact, what did the team do? What was the value of the organization? How did the team transform the organization? So it's a weird title for an award because I really think about it as proof of the group's effort over the last 18 or 24 months. The team has really transformed what we do inside the business, the people on the team, the size of the team, the capability. So it was a cool sort of capstone for everybody in the group to sort of celebrate that. So the naming is unfortunate because I feel like it actually sort of belongs to the whole team. But
that's really insightful, Neil, because I have a feeling we're going to learn a lot more about your leadership style. Just the fact that that's your first statement is that it's not you, it's the whole team, gives a bit of insight into you and who you are and how you show up.
Yeah.
So this will be interesting. So, with that, I often, as I'm introducing myself to the audience, a lot of people will hear me say I'm a nurturing driver, right? I like to get things done by caring for others. I look at, one of my core beliefs is that no one wakes up with bad intent. I've learned to know who I am and how I show up, and I love to share it with others. I'd love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your leadership style, and how you show up as a leader.
So I'm not a technologist by trade. So I don't have formal schooling. I can't configure a firewall. I can't write any code. So I have been a lifelong problem solver. I started as a private investigator for a couple of years doing fraud investigations. And there's really no playbook. You would be handed a file and figure it out, find a way to get to an outcome and answer. And that turned into a career as a business analyst, as the go-between between end users who had the kernel of this idea and a technology team. And it was fundamentally what got me out of bed in the morning. The idea that you would go back and forth and you would riff on this idea and you would see people get excited as you were like, oh yeah, we could also do this. And then to deliver that and have the light in the face and they light up and they're excited. What was once an idea is now a thing that they get to use every day. And they kept making our team bigger and bigger and bigger. And one day, because they kept giving us more resources to deliver interesting products. And one day I woke up and I was the IT director. And that was not by design. So my style fundamentally is I look at the IT organization as a creative enterprise. And that, like, when you think about like how do you create a environment that fosters creativity, it's got to be emotionally vulnerable, it has to be autonomous, it can't be directive. And so like all of a sudden those things start to unfold when you look at, I view my job is to make an environment where interesting creative people want to come do the things that they're really good at, and we create a collection of those folks, and then we turn them loose to be as autonomous as possible, because that's where the magic happens, both from their own creativity and right. And yeah, you say, okay, we're going to go this way. These are the kinds of things we want to do. Here's some thematic umbrellas. And then you get way more ideas than, one person that's top the organization telling everybody how to achieve that goal.
So it's interesting, Neil, because the two words you're using, IT and creative, would not
Right.
normally be two words I would have put together.
I will. So whether you're talking about, you think about writing a term paper or writing a document, there's a million ways to do that. And you've seen people do it in a really interesting way and a really boring way. And when you write code, right, you've got the same sort of, and ironically, when you think about a network engineer, okay, I need you to solve this. I need you to achieve this thing with your network design. There is a fundamental element of creativity, and you can see folks who can deploy that and folks who can't, and they roll out sort of a standardized. And so there is a difference almost in every role. I mean, I would take the creative person, and it makes interviewing and finding the right people who want to be in that environment. And not everybody wants to be in that environment, right? There's a lot of people who just want to show up and do this, they want a standard operating procedure. They don't want to be pioneering new things. Finding the right people and adding them to the team has always been sort of one of the most important things you can do for our organizations.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so, I talk a lot about the E3 leadership code, which talks about expressing an end vision, engaging people the way they want to engage, and executing, make sure you're delivering all with emotional qualities. So you pretty, in your opening, you kind of touched on all of that. But really what you're having to do is paint a picture then and express a very different vision for people coming into your organization.
Yes. We do that. We try to do that in the interview process. We give them access to, and this, when I say we, I mean, this is probably the last, my previous organization and this organization. So like two organizations worth of teams. We invariably give the candidate access to a lot more people than they would normally have access to. So we're gonna try to have you have 2 or 3 people. In the age, like nobody wants 5 interviews, and so we give them a couple people from different parts of the organization, because our goal is to make sure that we have enough data points to sort of make a good read, but B, we want to be in service to the candidate. We want that person to know that this is an unstructured pirate ship. If you can't figure out what you should do next, and that's not something you want to do, you should know that so you don't choose us, because you're going to be unhappy, right? So it's also our goal to telegraph exactly the kind of environment we are, because we don't want anyone to be taken by surprise. So I think that's part of it in terms of expressing a vision. And then I try to connect with each new team member, regardless of the size that we get to, and just talk about sort of what makes us different. I have a pirate ship slide. It's under construction. I don't always love it all, but we explicitly have a discussion about what makes us different, right? We are not a reactive organization. Yes. Do we fix your printer cartridges and have help desk tickets? Yes. Do we do way more than that? Yeah. Should everybody in the organization be looking for ways to deliver new kinds of value? Yeah, we want everybody's ideas. That's not limited to, right, someone on the team or a role.
And as you keep talking, I keep hearing the word that comes over and over again is we, right? And
Oh,
really being team oriented, which is amazing, right? Because that is what leadership truly is. But I don't know if you even realize that that's what you keep saying. Is that
I don't, because I still think of um, I still think of myself as a member of the team. I have a job to do, right? My team will engage me when we've got stakeholder problems, when somebody wants to brainstorm an idea, and so I can't imagine not getting a chance to be involved. I get super excited because most of my team doesn't really need me most days, right? They're all super effective in their own, and so I get excited when somebody comes and needs me to like run a session or brainstorm an idea. And so I still think about myself as a member of the team with a different job to do, right? My job is to make sure the rest of the organization is aware of what they're doing, that we're aligned to what they want us to be working on. But I have never sort of created a separation, right? I just have a different job, just like everybody else on the team.
yeah. No, and I'm complimenting you on it, right? This is how it most should, right?
Yeah.
But I think you probably, I'm assuming you've been in a situation where you've seen it not work that way.
Yeah. It's not good for interviews, I've been told. I'm not supposed to talk like that when I interview. I'm supposed to say I, and I did this, and I achieved that, which is very difficult. Yeah, I feel like when you get into leadership roles, you start talking about, particularly higher levels of the organization, you invariably, when you're a leader, you have sort of three jobs. You've got to be a leader for your team. You're a peer to some group, whether you're a director or an executive, and then you're a team member somewhere. So you've got to service your leader. And I feel like I have gotten sideways when you think about bad bosses. Like there are bosses that are more concerned with the other two dimensions, right? That they're more focused on being an amazing participant to their leader, or they're focused on being a part of their peer group, which is never really, just not how I'm wired, right? Which has its own pros and cons. But those are like when I think about the negative experiences, I don't think anybody gets up in the mustache in the morning and like twists their mustache and starts tying people to railroad tracks. But like they don't, they're not prioritizing their time and doing the work that in the way that I would do it myself. And so that, right, creates the friction.
Yeah. So, I mean, from everything you're saying, it really is about your job is to take care of those that are in your charge. You're not in charge of them. And this is something I hear Simon Sinek say all the time, right? We're really caring and feeding for the people in our charge. And that's our primary responsibility. But not everyone shows up that way. Not everyone. And that's what our goal is, to really help motivate people to make sure they understand management and leadership is a different role than being an individual contributor.
Yes. I mean, I saw many years ago, I saw a speaker at a local project management institute, like continuing ed breakfast. And he had recently come off being an IT leader for this global pharmaceutical company. His team spanned the globe, and he said, I've never been less in charge of my own performance than right now.
Mm,
And then he went on to talk about that the only way that he can influence that is selecting people who he feels reflect how he would do things, or how he would want things run, or how operations, because it's so big and so disjointed that your only choice is to sort of achieve through culture and sort of vibe building, right? Like putting people in place that create the same environment that you would want if it was just 25 people. And I've carried that around for 20 years. Um, I I uh, I don't know what it would be like. I was thinking about my like what the team does every day is fundamentally what at the end of the year when I sit down to say what did I in my review, right? What did I accomplish? I mean, I'm a fraction of most of those things. The team, you're talking about the team. So like I don't understand anybody who doesn't think about that their foundation, their ability to get things done is fundamentally a group effort, especially at larger scales, but at any scale.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, one of the things that I'm pulling away from this also is as you were talking of being at service to the people you're interviewing, to your team, we often talk about your authentic self showing up as yourself to the table and your leadership style. But what I'm hearing you also say is your team and your company has their authentic self. You're creating a culture that has an identity, and you're saying this is who we are, and either you are going to fit in or you're not. And that's taking it up a level, which is amazing.
I certainly hope so. I love to think that that's what we do. I'd love to think that everybody on our team, and there's 25 of us, I would love to think that everybody gets to show up and talk about their weird hobbies or, right? I feel like I see evidence of that, but if you're out there in the chat, right, I guess like if anybody's out there, you should probably let us know if that's not happening. But yeah, I think we've got, I when I think about conversations that happen, we have people sharing, right? We've got a guy on our team who's rebuilding a Trans Am into a kit, like, right, from Knight Rider. We've got people who have backgrounds like mine filled with all interesting stuff. We've got, right? So it feels like we end up talking about other dimensions of our coworkers rather than just like, hey, did you get that thing done? Um, but you can't trust me. I'm the worst. I mean, I'm not experiencing that, right?
Well, I think you're naturally doing it. And so actually Ralph had asked this question earlier in the chat, but I think it's relevant now. How do you foster that kind of attitude within your team and with your team members to have them share that kind of information?
Um, I think there's a two-part formula. First, there's going to be people who choosing the right people to be on the team. There are people who don't want that. So those are probably not a great fit if that's what you're trying to make, right? I think the other part is there's there's eras. In the early era, so 20 months ago or 24 months ago when I started there, I had to talk about my authentic self and right, and I would hear people say like, "Oh, so and so plays D&D," and so I would go have a D&D conversation, um, and then that person would know that, right? So I think that on the personal front, I think going directly at difficult conversations and treating them as a constructive outcome. Like hey, I have to give you this bad news, or I have to give you this critical feedback. And I think when you get into positions of power and authority where no one knows that you should have that conversation. So there's no one pushing you to have that conversation. No one's going to make you. So it's optional. And you watch lots of leaders, just put that over for tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and right, it atrophies. So I think coming at conversations transparently, hey, here's the real deal. Here's what's happening in the company, or here's what's happening with this difficult topic, or let's talk about this behavior I need to change. Doing that in a constructive way, so then the far side, that relationship is more robust, and the person knows that they can trust you to be upfront even when the news isn't great.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fundamental building blocks, and if people see you do that enough times, they start to dip their toe in that pool. And then the team has candid conversations with each other. And then eventually you get fired from that job because you don't have to do it anymore, because it's the team who is the collective gatekeeper. I don't do it, but I am now one of many people doing that, right? You've got 25 people who are gatekeepers to that environment, and they don't want anyone in here who's not going to sort of support that same kind of place. So I think slow, steady, consistent, hard work, right? Transparent, authentic conversations, and people got to know you're having them. They got to be visible, right? And that's demonstration of how it's going to be.
Yeah. One of the things, one of the best practices I've brought into our organization, we actually ask permission. Are you ready? I've got some information I need to share with you. Are you in the right
Mm,
place? Because sometimes we're not in the right place to hear that constructive feedback in a positive way. So we'll set her, and there's days that I'll come back to my team and be like, you know what, honestly, I'm not ready for it. Just give me a couple minutes. I need to like step away,
that's awesome.
because if you're not in the right place, you're not going to hear it. And
Yeah.
I'm someone that believes feedback in those difficult conversations are the greatest gifts and have probably had the greatest impact in our careers at some point when someone's had the courage to have that conversation.
Um, so in my first, I was at my first organization for like 15 years. Every couple of years, I got a new job, and so I was a BA, and then there was two developers and one other BA. So there's four of us, and we had implemented a bunch of systems together. And then one day the leader left, and so I got promoted. And so it was weird. On a Friday, I was a team member. On Monday, I was suddenly the manager. And so I kept trying to be a member of the team. I kept answering questions about the systems we had implemented, and I was one of the team. And one day, that team of three people sort of came to the opening of my cube, and they were like, "We need you to stop answering questions because you're wrong. You're out of touch. Your information is old because you're not doing it every day, and
Hmm.
you're making bigger messes for us to clean up. So please just go do your job and let us do ours." And that was a magic moment because of the relationships we had had as peers, they felt comfortable. There wasn't going to be some kind of weird retaliation. And I've never forgotten that. And I sort of strive to create that environment, I feel like, over and over and over. Where like, it's okay, you can tell me my idea is dumb. You can tell me that I have bad behaviors. Like, our hierarchy shouldn't matter in that discussion. We're just coworkers working on the same thing. And if I'm off base or I've got a bad habit, you should tell me that, right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And you think back of different nuggets that have impacted us in our career and how we show up, right? And they really are powerful, like that example. So thanks for sharing. We actually have a question for you from Peter. How do you balance the use of principles with incentives or anything else to encourage and influence ongoing and positive cultural change to more effective communication and collaboration with the team and external to the team?
Oh, I'm going to answer this. I'm probably not qualified to answer this, so let's start with that. When I think about intrinsic and extrinsic, so when I think about incentives and right, that's extrinsic, so it's an external reward. Everything I've ever seen says if you take something that is intrinsic and you reward it externally, people will stop doing it if you take the external. You currently you sort of transfer it, right? And
Hmm.
so my short answer is we do not reward the behavior that we want in our environment, right? The working environment is the reward, right? You get to contribute and have space and freedom and do stuff. So what we do is the flip side. So there's no carrot, but we absolutely deploy the stick for relentlessly unacceptable behavior, because
Mm,
the second you let that stand, that's sort of like decay. And then people are like, well, why am I behaving this way if we're going to let this other person behave in this not acceptable way? So that's, I would say, we sort of demonstrate what we want through accountability and setting expectations. And I guess you would see when I look at the teams that are in play today, we have got a couple of product teams that have turned out massive wins compared to previous years where there was a different sort of leadership style. Me, that's their own reward. That those team members are going home knowing that they just murdered it at work and they have delighted all these people and turned out all this really cool product. So there's, I mean, yes, is there merits and bonus and all the traditional things for doing a good job? Yes, but we don't have a reward system to be like, good job, you adhered to our values.
Right. But I'm guessing, and just we started the conversation today of, the reward for the CIO award, you're saying it's the whole team. You're
Yeah.
acknowledging everyone as you go along, right?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Yes. Thank you. See, I told you I wasn't qualified to answer that question. Um, we encourage the team to make use of a lot of the peer recognition program. So anytime somebody says like, "Oh, Shelly was so helpful to me today," and like that session, you'd be like, "Hey, go over there and drop a high five," and right. And so, but I think about that as just encouraging the same positive behavior. I guess you're correct. There is a reward there. Somebody does get a $5, Dunkin' Donuts card, and like there's a recognition piece there.
Yeah, it's less the money. It's more the fact that the high five is
Right.
powerful, right? And people forget it's just giving that high five, that thank you, right? Just those things are more powerful than any kind of extrinsic rewards, in my opinion, right? And
Yeah.
so many people forget that the power in that. And I think you have a tendency, I'm just listening as I continue to listen to you, there's so much you do naturally that I don't think you realize the best behaviors and, characteristics that you're bringing forth in your leadership style. I think it is very natural you show up, and my gut is it's how you saw goodness when you were building your career.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now go ahead if you're.
You had at one point we had talked about previous leaders. I had a CIO that I worked for, and he was this enabler type, and so he turned the three of us who were his reports into these independent leaders. And that was the moment that I was like, I'm gonna go get an MBA because I can now see what using executive superpowers for good would look like. I had never had it modeled before, and that experience was literally the catalyst for me to go get the MBA so that I could get access to the room and make cool environments for a team like he had let us do. Right? I wanted to just go do that pattern. So props to Bob Baird out there. He's retired. He doesn't need my props anymore, but shout out.
Yeah, so he really encouraged you, nurtured you to step into your own and be yourself and show up with everything that you could bring to the table.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So another Carrie was asking a question. We were talking about the recognition. Do you get to know, or do you ask the question about of your team members how they would like to be recognized?
Uh, I probably don't ask. So I'm not a great question asker. I get excited, and it's more like you're talking to somebody and they're excited and you're excited and you're just like start talking over and everybody's like jazzing each other. So I'm not great about sitting back and like intentionally asking questions that lead people to the sort of therapy move. It's just not. I get too excited, and so I can tell you I know a ton about my team members. I know what they like, and I sort of know their currency. Have I had an explicit conversation about how they like to be recognized? No, but I can tell you what they like, what kind of work they like, what they don't like. So I feel like that's another really advice I dispense all the time everywhere. Like anytime I'm in the LinkedIn articles and they ask you to contribute and they're like, how would you do this? You'd be like, well, do you know your team? Because if you knew your team, you'd know exactly what levers to pull, right? And like this person would love that opportunity and this person would want to die if you asked them to do that, right? So like that's such a critical piece of anything to me is spending the time to do that.
Yeah, and forensic, being forensic scientist, just looking, being a consultant, I think a lot of these things are you were always looking for the clues. And you're probably naturally looking for the clues of everyone on your team without having to explicitly ask the questions.
Yeah, I think the emotional it sounds sort of funny, but like as an investigator, you frequently had to manipulate people, right? Um, and understanding the levers to pull and watching someone and understanding how you think that how you could achieve that. And now you're just deploying it for a different purpose, right? Getting the time to get to know somebody so that you understand like what opportunities they would be really excited about. So if you came across that, you're like, hey, check this out. Like, look at this. But I think it all comes back. I really credit a couple of years as a private investigator with a ton of formative outlook and skill sets.
Yeah. And it's, you used the word manipulation, and the word that I've used that a couple of times.
Influence.
People are like influence. They're like, that's a little better of a word,
We
Kath.
were not influencing people. We were manipulating people. I was trying to trick you into telling me information you should not give me.
Fair enough. But I think when you have the trust among your team members, right? Like, it's not manipulation. It's really, if you're earnestly care and interested and you're putting yourself out there, people want to share, right?
Yeah.
And when you can learn that, um, you start to move forward.
When I think about, right, in lots of leadership roles, whether that's a project leadership, you do have to influence stakeholders. You have to understand what that person's currency is. You have to understand what's going to be meaningful to them. You got to understand what they care about and what they don't care about. Don't talk about that stuff. Talk about these things, right? So there's a ton of transference into the office space in all kinds of roles.
Yeah.
Um,
You're bringing up a story for me. I was actually implementing and selling project management software for a while. And I'm getting up doing a training this one day. I'll never forget. It was early on in my career. I'm like, project management, it's about a start date and an end date and, all of the tasks and following it all up. And a gentleman came up to me afterwards. And he said, Kath, I really think you're missing what project management is. And he said, it is resource management. It is all about the people that are delivering, and how do you make sure they show up and they want to deliver. And it like blew my mind at that point, having been an accountant and being very, and that was game changing for me. And I'll never forget, the book he recommended, and that was my pivotal moment of, oh, if you want to get stuff done, it is about taking care of people and figuring out what's going to really motivate them and encourage them and get them to show up to be their best self.
yeah, I mean, bands blow up because they don't have collaborative chemistry or they lose it somewhere in their journeys. And you look at a team that has real chemistry and a team that doesn't, and the output is material.
Yeah.
It's just not a science to get there. It's like, I think that's why organizations shy away from that, because you can't put that on paper. Like, what's the chemistry rating of this team? You're like, but you see in the output.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, Neil, I just want to be very conscious of time, and we try to keep it to a half hour. I could talk all day with you because I love how you show up and your leadership style. And I think it's a very natural style that you've naturally learned over the years. If you have someone on your team and they're looking to develop, or you're mentoring someone else, what's, the number one piece of advice you would give to a new manager?
Um, I think it would be sort of put yourself second. Look at it's sort of funny, the Ted Lasso. Like, what does this situation need, right? And if you do that and you sort of legitimately help the other people around you, that includes helping your leader so that they look at you as a valuable, and helping your team members, but like just sort of deprioritize you in that service process. And I think that goes right a lot of the time. You get burned, but it's the right long game play.
Yeah. Check your ego out the door and service the team, your members, appreciate them. These are all the things, the tidbits I'm taking away from this session. And when we can do that, people want to show up. They're going to do more. And as you say, they're innovative, and you've created a creative team, to really bring that forward, which is amazing. So, congratulations to you and your team and the awards that you've seen. I'm looking forward to watching your career because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more goodness coming down the pipe.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone that has joined us. I know there's a couple of questions we missed. We'll answer those offline when we get a chance. But join us next week as we continue this journey of hearing about different leaders from different industries, different ways of leading, because it's about delivering results and caring about the people to help you be able to drive things forward. So, a little plug, we have our E3 Leadership Bootcamp happening starting next Wednesday. This is where you can learn about things of how to engage your people, express and envision, and really deliver results by connecting to the hearts of people. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. Take care. Neil, thanks
All right.
again. This was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.